era of multilateralism, BRICS is expanding and its sphere is growing. It has an objective of countering Western-dominated political and economic world, among others. It aims to reduce global reliance on US dollars and, of course, give an advantage to emerging economies, especially of the Global South. Our focus this day on Global Insider will bring us to the declaration of the BRICS 2024 Summit, of course, October 22nd to 24th, 2024, 16 BRICS Summit, which held recently in Kazan, Russian Federation, where leaders from Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, and the United Arab Emirates gathered under the theme Strengthening Multilateralism for Just Global Development and Security in the summit, which highlighted the importance of solidarity and cooperation among member states. The Kazan Declaration emerged as a significant tool outlining the aspirations of BRICS for a more equitable and balanced multipolar world. But what does this declaration mean for the future? What tangible actions are necessary to transform these aspirations into reality? Our esteemed panel will examine the potential pathways for the materialization of the Kazan Declaration and its implications for countries in the Global South and beyond. Of course, this is Global Insight on For You Media Africa. And of course, what tangible actions are necessary to transform the Kazan 2024 Declaration into reality? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's edition of your discursive, informative program. It is Global Insight, brought to you by the Pan-African Television. It is For You Media Africa. And we continue to look at the highlights of what happened in Kazan, the Russian Federation, as the nation hosted the 16th summit of BRICS bloc or BRICS Plus bloc. We're looking at the feasibility of this declaration, which stands today as a very positive tool to ensuring that BRICS positions itself in the world of multipolarity, and of course BRICS shaping the world. How feasible, and of course what is the scope for this the bloc that has expanded to 9 members, and of course just to remind us about the panel of experts that will bring more highlights into this or insight into this topic for discussion, focusing on the declaration of the BRICS Summit 2024. Will be joining us from Moscow, Russia. That is Yulia BERG, who is a political scientist, founder, GLOBUS Expert Club. We'll always also have ACHILLE, a banker, international financial expert. He's joining from the United States of America. EKANE Priestley, he'll be joining us from Germany. International relations expert, Dr. GNAKA LAGOKE from the US, professor of history and Pan-African studies at Lincoln University, Pennsylvania. And of course, he's from Cote d'Ivoire. ARNAUD, political consultant from France, but will be joining from Moscow, and Professor LAEED ZAGHALAMI from Algeria, Algiers University, Faculty of Information and Communication. Ladies and gentlemen, and of course we're diving straight away to the discussions on the topic, and of course coming to say welcome to Professor LAEED ZAGHALAMI, bringing to him this question of his holistic view of the Kazan 2024 declaration that culminated the meeting of BRICS leaders in Russia.
Thank you very much, Clarice. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to all of you. I'm so happy to be part of this panel, so fantastic, so various, so diverse from all over the world. That's to say that we are now, and the world has entered a new multipolar system, and that's what were looking for so many years. I think, frankly speaking, when I looked at the final declaration of Kazan, I feel I'm strongly optimistic about the future of the world, because what happened for the last decades, 5 or 6 decades since the end of the World War II, we inherit a Western system based on hegemony, on supremacy, on, of course, injustice, and more than that, on poverty and war all over the world. And of course, the damage that made by Western countries, Western values are so amazing for the future of humanity. And here we are, those people, those countries which attended the Kazan meeting, it's for me, it's a turning point in the history of the international relation of this new century. I am sure and I am confident, as long as there is a strong, and I have to emphasize, a strong political will for those who attended Kazan meeting, I think we are about to start to begin to spark off a new values, a new system, a new order in the making. And of course, it may take longer, but for sure, the humanity, the 40% or over 50% of the humanity has embarked on a new order, political system based on equity, based on justice, based on respect, based on, of course, respecting each other, on whether it's culture, it's religious, or it's political, without interfering in people's or countries' internal affairs. So
okay.
I am so optimistic for the future of the world. Now
Indeed.
we are actually, the world has come, I would say, the Western hegemony, the supremacy of the West finally have come to the end, and now we are about to start a new chapter.
Indeed, Professor LAEED, it is a new chapter for the world that is being led by
multipolarity and international.
Okay. Thank you so much, Professor. It is indeed a new chapter for the world, and Brics, of course, is a turning point. Let's welcome ACHILLE by asking him the question of what are the key objectives which you think are very imperative, which were outlined in the Kazan Declaration, and how do you think this will align with the broader goals of Brics as a group or coalition?
Good morning or good afternoon, Clarice. Good afternoon to all the listeners or the viewers of this interesting show. The objectives of the Kazan, declaration or the Kazan Declaration, or the Brics Summit this year in Kazan, there were 3 objectives essentially, from what I've gathered, 3 or 4. The first one was strengthening multilateralism, which means based on the declaration, it emphasizes the importance of rules-based, open, transparent, and fair multilateral trading system. It calls also for reforms in global institutions like the IMF, the World Bank, and also to increase representation for new countries, emerging countries, as we call them, and developing countries. The second point was the global stability and security, which in this declaration advocates for a fair and inclusive global system and condemns unilateral, coercive, measures such as economic sanctions and that really disrupt international trade. So That's for the global stability and security standpoint. For the geopolitical, on the geopolitical standpoint, on geopolitical front, the Kazan Declaration addresses various geopolitical concerns that include the Ukraine and the Middle East conflicts, urging adherence to the UN standards and promoting peaceful resolutions through dialogues. So essentially, that's what it's advocating. And on the economic front, the declaration also highlights the potential for using local currencies in trade. So that's trade between or among BRICS countries. So even though a common BRICS currency remains a topic of further study. So there are the few objectives that the Kazan meeting was about, and the declaration addresses those different concerns as well.
Okay, thank you so much. If Yulia Burke is already there, we welcome you to the program, and looking at it from another perspective of just being informed of that. At this juncture, we have Dr. GNAKA LAGOKE. Welcome to the program, sir. And wanting to get you on holistic approach as to how you viewed the Kazan Declaration that culminated the 16th BRICS summit in Russia.
Yeah, thank you very much, Clarice, for this opportunity. The most important thing here, I think Achille said it, and then Mr. ZAGHALAMI also. But one thing I want to put emphasis on is the fact that the BRICS countries, in the process to de-dollarize the international economy or the international financial system, have agreed to use or to conduct trade using local currencies. For me, it is a major shift in international development. And when we know that since 1945, international development and the international system are led by the US-led institutions like the Bretton Woods institutions. So for me, that was a very important element. Also, another element is that there is a new category of membership. The countries that are not fully members of the BRICS, but that are now going to be seen as partners. I think Algeria is one of those countries. Yeah. I think that's one thing that is very important. It shows inclusiveness. It shows openness. It shows that the pattern of collaborations that the BRICS wanted to embrace is different from what we've seen so far with the US-led institutions.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. GNAKA LAGOKE. Just to remind you, viewers, if you're just tuning in, you're on to your Pan-African television. It is For You Media Africa, and we continue the discussion in the same light while waiting for other guests to join. Yulia, if you're there, you're welcome. And of course, we're looking at the BRICS summit, which just ended in Russia, hosted by the Russian President Vladimir Putin, and we saw the massive attendance, which has actually brought about a change of opinions pertaining the position of Russia in the world of international relations. What do you think this has to do, especially in line with the Kazan Declaration that opens the way for the future of multipolar or a just world order?
Well, I think the perception could have changed, yet the summit just simply reflects the reality. Because even though there has been quite a lot of various kinds of statements being made, even though there were several occasions on which the General Assembly of the United Nations voted, and some of the countries' representatives admitted that they were voting in a specific way because of external pressure being imposed on them. So I think the attendance and the 35 delegations from different countries were not really changing the situation, but they were revealing something that was happening behind the scenes. And behind the scenes, as we know, even such countries as the United States and many European countries are still actively involved in trade with Russia. Yet at the moment, it's just happening through various kinds of, let's say, other entities midwifing the process. So the event, the public event of such a scale, was a clear demonstration of those processes that have been happening behind the scenes, and the work that was being done on the basis of the Brics platform, including the work that was done in order to facilitate transaction mechanisms and payments in national currencies, and in order to come up with solutions for a more balanced global defense system or global security system, which means that the priority is not in searching for enemies within the neighboring regions, but it's about defense from external threats such as terrorism, even though the very definition of terrorism, given the history, let's say, of many organizations that are considered to be such, could be under doubt, because one of the organizations that is admitted to be terroristic globally, for example, is ISIS. Yet if we look at how ISIS was created, we see that it's quite an artificial structure, initially established in the interests of the United States again. So the outcomes of the BRICS summit will be unpacking and unfolding for the upcoming several weeks for sure, because the list of partners will be officially announced, and there will be some bureaucratic procedures related to finalization of the work done by various kinds of working groups. So we will see the postponed effects of this one. Yet it's already clear that that the new world order, the new multipolar world, is becoming more and more visible, and it's getting out from behind the scenes to the very front.
Okay, from behind the scenes to the very front, I will stay with you, Yulia. When you highlight these peculiarities of the BRICS bloc, we want to ask maybe the tangible actions that are necessary to transform these aspirations into reality. In your own perspective, what do you think is that diplomatic strategy that the BRICS needs to use to ensure the materialization of the Kazan Declaration?
Well, those steps are already being taken in many different directions, but of course, since the issue of financial transactions and payments and all the financial infrastructure, since this one is essential in order to establish everything else, because the money flow would be like blood in those veins, right? So this is number one, and there have already been mechanisms that were being introduced, yet quite complicated ones. And now at the BRICS summit, the new payment system, Brics Bridge, was introduced, and even some kind of the new cards were being tested. Of course, this was not a real system, just a demonstration. Yet it goes to show what will be happening in the upcoming future. And in terms of the Brics Bridge, it's one of the most important, I think, outcomes of the summit, as well as the investment fund that is aimed to regulate investment flow and to make it less of a instrument of manipulation and suppression of development and support of own policies. So we saw that happening with the International Monetary organizations, not just the IMF, but other foundations that have been pretty much manipulating the countries that are not capable of, are not being able to afford various kinds of projects, even the ones of essential need, right? And we saw where it led to. So the recent example with the pandemic, when countries were pretty much forced to buy vaccines, well, anyway, even if the vaccines were provided to them, it still meant that they would remain in debt. And now we see that a lot of those vaccines are just simply being destroyed as they expired, because quite soon, pretty much when the special military operation started, it became clear that the threats of the coronavirus pandemic were quite exaggerated. So people realized that the problem was not as big as it was portrayed.
Okay.
But the debt remained. Yes, the point here is that the pandemic turned out to be, well, at least exaggerated, or not to say a big scam, but the debt still remained there for the countries that had to buy those vaccines.
All right, thank you. Let's go back to Professor LAEED, and of course, looking at the scope for BRICS, we cannot undermine the position of the African continent. And in your own perspective, Professor, what do you think is that strategy that African countries can maybe use to be able to benefit from this the advantages that BRICS bloc brings to the table?
Frankly speaking, I feel very, as I said, very optimistic about the outcome of Kazan's declaration, and particularly when it comes to our continent, the African continent, which is still under one way or the other a different form of colonization and of occupation. And of course, as you may have noticed, the continent is the only place in the world with 55 countries without any voice at the level of United Nations Security Council. This is injustice when it comes to when we observe the system inherited from after the Second World War II. So this is for Africa. It's an opportunity to speak out their mind and to have a say in the world affairs. And I think, like it or not, BRICS is embarking the rest of the world on a new path for fair and equitable world system, based, as I said, on respect of internal affairs, on no intervention in internal affairs, on business as usual, on win-win cooperation, and so forth. So that's why, for many years, Africa has been set aside that they don't have any say on, as I said. So this is the opportunity for African countries and to first of all to unite themselves and to have an opportunity to impose their view. And I think they have been rejected and marginalized by the Western values and system for their interference in the names of democracy, in the names of human rights, in the names of freedom. Today, BRICS spirit, I would say Kazan spirit, has emphasized that we have to respect countries' tradition, countries' culture, countries' independence. So on this basis, I feel confident that there is an opportunity for Africa to of course, African population as well as African leader to think again and to remove all their some kind of dependence on Western countries. Western values have been devastating for African population and African economy. So that's why I am so confident. I would say, I'm not being paternalistic, but what I want to say, I would say that this is a golden opportunity for the
Indeed.
African leader to take this Kazan Declaration and make a shift to a new,
and of course trying to ensure more economic viability. From the perspective of the African continent, what are those economic loopholes that stands at as impediment from Africa maybe surviving under the BRICS, and how can we maneuver this to integrate fully into the new system of multipolarity?
Yeah, that's a very good question. From the African perspective, economically, the declaration presents new avenues for financial independence for African states through alternatives like the new development bank that we know already. So this institution offers equitable lending opportunities that could really help African nations reduce dependency on Western financial systems that are dominated by the IMF and the World Bank. So by engaging with BRICS economic framework, African countries can lessen their debt burdens and explore new markets as well. And so if we also look at the goal of the summit from the economic perspective, from the economic standpoint, the goal was to keep emphasizing de-dollarization. De-dollarization, which aims to reduce dependency on U.S. dollars by exploring alternative currencies for trade within the BRICS. So and so this is done through the trade that are going to be done using BRICS countries' currencies, local currencies, which is fundamentally important here, because the world today has been dominated by the U.S. dollar for every activity, every transaction, because the U.S. dollar is the currency that has been agreed to with oil producers to be used. And so every time, as you want to buy or you need currency, you need a dollar, and the dollar, as we know, the economy is really energy transform, right? Energy transform creates the economy. So if you're buying your energy with the dollar, then your economy is going to be controlled. I mean, the U.S. through its laws have decided that if you use the dollar anywhere in the world, the U.S. government have a say in that transaction. So, so therefore they have a say in your economy. If you use the dollar to buy oil and then use that oil to boost your economy, then the U.S. has a say in your economy. Because if they sanction you because you've done transaction using the dollar with a country that is prohibited, that has been sanctioned by the U.S. government, then you are going to be sanctioned as well. So that is a problem. That's the issue that the whole world has been facing for the past few years, and so it's imperative that the world decides where it wants to go, and that's what the BRICS are offering to the world today. That opportunity to de-dollarize using local currency for transaction. And then maybe in the future, they may have a single currency. So there's so many different talks about that, different views on that subject. Having one currency for the BRICS, is it something that is feasible given the disparities of the economies in the world? Is it something that is that we wish? Or is it just better to just trade with our local currency using a crypto currency like a stable coin? A stable coin that's probably going to be based on gold, so that will provide more stability for that stable coin, and therefore allow countries to transact using the local currency, therefore reducing, if not, significantly reducing transaction fees as well as conversion. Conversion, right? So.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Achille, in the same perspective from the economic standpoint, with you, Dr. NYEMECK LAGOKE, looking at how, presently African countries are overburdened, and where is the place of the new BRICS Development Bank in trying to salvage this economic burden from Africans that African countries that can maybe make a clear economic trajectory for the countries, and how can this development bank, in your perspective, maybe come to assisting the new world in Africa, particularly with countries in the Sahel that have taken the milestone to define sovereignty in every dimension, particularly economic sovereignty. Where is the place of the BRICS Bank, and when do you think it is feasible for the bank to indulge African countries?
Yeah, I'm going to try and answer that question, a very important one. And then there is a previous question that you asked. Then I would like to, talk about that also, if you don't mind. I think that we, all of us, we agree that the BRICS is an opportunity for the global South. It is an opportunity for Africa, but the burden is not on the BRICS. The burden of the BRICS is to create the framework for a polycentric world, for multipolarity, for multilateralism. That is the burden of the BRICS. And then to create a new world of solidarity, of shared prosperity, and then also to reduce the hegemony of the West in financial, economic, political aspects of the world. But the African countries, they have to take the lead, and they have to take responsibility to come with a new vision for the development of Africa. For instance, we have Egypt and Ethiopia that are members of the BRICS, and I think that those two countries, and now I can talk about Algeria in a few. I think that these countries, which are already the leaders of the African continent in terms of population, in terms of development, in terms of capability, these countries should come together and propose integrated development plans instead of seeing Ethiopia and Egypt fighting over the Renaissance Dam, for instance, in Africa. We want to see those two countries coming together. First of all, solve the issues, like quoting the BRICS Declaration, African solutions for African problems, and then propose projects that can see the involvement and the investment of countries and populations and people in Africa. And so the burden is on African countries to seize the opportunity to free themselves from the yoke of the West. The BRICS is not going to come and free those African countries. And that's why last time I was saying that I want to see the BRICS countries be more forceful in supporting countries like Mali, Niger, and Burkina, which have expressed the interest to be sovereign and to be free from the yoke of the West. For people like us, we think that this can be done only through the framework of Pan-Africanism, which put emphasis on the unity of Africa and the imperative integrated development of Africa, so that Africans can enjoy the resources, and then they can reduce the exploitation of African resources by multinationals or by the Western countries, or even countries that come from different parts of the world, even from the East. One of the things that I think we should not forget, it is that the BRICS, the Kazan Declaration was very important. It's not so much because of the financial aspect, or because of the de-dollarization, because of the decision, to trade using local currencies. It is also because the Kazan Declaration put emphasis on the imperative to reform the Security Council of the United Nations.
Indeed, yeah.
And the Brazil, which is leading like the G20 presidency. Also, and then I think the G20 presidency, there's going to be a G20 meeting in Brazil, I think in November. And Brazil also put emphasis on the imperative to reform the international institution.
Indeed.
Very important element. Let me finish on this one.
Okay.
Another element which is very important also that we saw in the Kazan Declaration is the reference to the Durban Declaration of 2001, when under the United Nations countries gathered, and countries like America, England, led by their black representatives, they were fighting against the Durban Declaration, which was put emphasis on the denunciation of slavery, chattel slavery, and that declaration put emphasis on the need for reparation. So what I'm saying is that when we see the Kazan Declaration, the echoing the importance to reform the international system, echoing the Durban Declaration that was denouncing racism, slavery, neo-Nazism, and fascism, I think that it is going to resonate across the globe, and there is going to be a new solidarity in the line of the non-alignment movement, which surfaced on the continent in the world in the 50s. I think that it is a very important moment in the history of the world at every level, economically, financially, politically, and then in the international affairs.
Okay, thank you. And to note that the BRICS is taking the helm during a very turbulent international scene, and which is actually intertwined. And now we want to look at the feasibility with you, dear Yulia. How can the BRICS bloc or BRICS Plus bloc navigate this turbulent international scene, inculcating or integrating as well the Western countries into the ideology or the vision of the new world that seeks to bring a shared, shared cooperation that prioritizes equal development among nations of the world? What do you think are those things that can be done to bring the West into this world of multilateralism and multipolarism without entering into some sort of a cold war or even a physical confrontation?
It's important to understand, and it was several times highlighted during the BRICS summit and during the press conference that was a follow-up to that, and many press statements being made, that the BRICS is not trying to come up with some kind of a competing model, or it's not trying to directly substitute the existing one, but it is developing as an autonomous one, which means that new mechanisms are being created, and if those would be making sense, and they seem to be making sense for a growing number of countries, then they would be naturally joined by the ones that would be willing to. As for the West and its role, well, it's quite clear that the economic system created by the West now looks like a huge bubble that is about to explode, and we see that it cannot continue this way forever. So the debt of those countries, including the United States, are now accounting for trillions and trillions, and there is nothing in those countries' economies, nothing of substantial value that could sustain that kind of debt. At the same time, we see that, and this might sound quite rude, but we're all, on this side of this, the barricades. Most of the countries of what is now called the global south, or what is called the global majority, what used to be called developing countries, most of those countries were considered nothing else but a resource base for the Western countries such as Europe, the United States. And this is the key point that is necessary to understand. So the dependence of those countries on the West is more about the system that those countries are being a part of. But when we talk about, the hard facts, when we talk about resources, when we talk about even human capital and human potential, the West fully relies on Africa, on Southeast Asia, on Asia, generally speaking, on South America. Yeah. So it's not going to survive on its own. And if those countries would be a part of some other system, and if those countries say, okay, now we trade using this platform, now you make transactions with us in our national currency, there would be no other way. But of course, if we're talking about the risks and if we're talking about the threats, we need to understand that the defense doctrine of the United States clearly says that economic threats, which could be also the threat to the US dollar as a mean of global trade, could be enough for preventive nuclear weapons, for preventive nuclear strikes. Sure. So we need to understand that economic threats could be triggering military reaction, and we could already somewhat see it happening with Libya, where the worst thing Muammar Gaddafi did, he was standing for Pan-Africanism and for a different role that African countries could play at the global arena, and he was also talking about independent financial system, right? Indeed. So we have already had historic examples when this kind of economic threats or threats to the dominance itself, the hegemony itself, were more than enough to impose all kinds of sanctions, to unroll the military potential, and to unroll the whole potential of psyops and everything else, information wars and everything that could have been used.
Okay.
So yes, we see that on the one hand, if we're talking in terms of very simple logic, there is just an alternative tree growing up. But if the West wouldn't be willing to jump on the tree, I think, well, sooner or later, it would have to happen. The key question is the amount of destruction and potential, let's say, victims of the transition process.
Okay. About the transition process, we're welcoming ARNAUD DEVALEY, a political consultant, with the question of the BRICS grain exchange deal, which the leaders in Kazan, hosted by Russian President Vladimir Putin, highlighted. So, ARNAUD DEVALEY, how imperative do you think will be the BRICS grain deal in ensuring particularly food security, maybe across the nations of the global south?
First of all, thank you for having me. Well, I would say the grain platform is one of many expressions that BRICS stands for, which is an organization based on pulling natural resources to the front and creating food security, but also energy security. And as one of your guests mentioned, hopefully alternate political platform to resolve disputes. Yeah. So the grain platform is very important because it provides a conduit for exchanges, potentially exports where needed, in a way that does not fall within the Western blackmail, does not fall within the, I would say, interference that can be, as we've seen this last year with the Ukrainian grain deal, which was brokered by Istanbul. So it's important that, in a way, not unlike what some neoconservatives mention when they refer to full spectrum dominance, BRICS takes its flight and express itself in and its new philosophy in as many fields as possible, and food security, including grain, security and grain platform is part of it.
Sure.
So that's kind of a pilot program which will somewhat, I will hope, pave the way for additional platforms of that kind based on mutual exchanges, which again are immune to any kind of Western pressure.
Okay. You were in Kazan as the summit was ongoing there, Arnaud. Let's look at how the growing, if actually the growing relevance of BRICS can pose a threat to the group of 20 or even the G7. And of course, if we are already looking at the future of BRICS or the future of the world, maybe with the philosophy of multipolarity and the BRICS being a very giant organizational bloc, how do we now handle these future threats to ensure that multilateralism or multipolarity does not bring about a more turbulent world, but rather bring about a world that will inculcate every bloc, north, west, east, and south?
Well, it's a good question. Well, I will refer to what Julia mentioned, which was very important. It was somewhat stated in between the lines, but omnipresent during the discussions,
yeah,
and prominent within the undertones of President Putin's press conference. BRICS is not here to challenge any kind of pre-existing order. It is not here to replace any existing order.
Yeah.
You have to recall that if BRICS exists in the first place, and with the momentum that it enjoys right now, it is only merely because the West has tried to weaponize economic organization and mechanism, and so for a long time, either via sanctions or via neoliberal policy which prevents the global South in its entirety to emerge as what they perceive as rivals. BRICS is not predicated on the notion of rivals. BRICS is predicated on the notion of mutual benefits, administration of the world affairs via consensus, all at the same time respecting everybody's specific particularities and contribution to world civilization, and respect to national sovereignty, which is a big departure from the way the United Nations Charter has been construed this past decade. And in that respect, I'm referring to the doctrine of humanitarian intervention, so to speak. Okay. This was never what the United Nations Charter was about. And it's important that those principles enunciated by the Russian president, but representing the view of all those who are really serious about being part of BRICS,
okay,
are concerned, is that the United Charter was celebrating its birthday, its anniversary during the Kazan summit. And in that respect, the very notion of sovereignty is right back in the middle of what has been going on there. There's no notion of one power, one unicentric power exerting its control and trying to impose its own values onto others. Quite the contrary, as a matter of fact.
All right, thank you so much. And I would love that you have a comment on this very particular point. Dr. GNAKA LAGOKE, we are looking at what Arnaud and even YULIA spelled out early on the fact that the BRICS is not out to replace, but just to have an alternative. The question is, let's look at the perspective from the African continent, being particular as to how nations across Africa have been defining their foreign policies in this turbulent moment and a time where multilateralism has increased across the African continent. We are particular here with the leadership of Kenya, William Ruto, and the utterances which he has made lately on global affairs and other countries. So how do you think, with this philosophy or idea in mind, how do you think maybe African countries can define a foreign policy that will not actually plunge the continent into more chaos, but will make it to stand strategically along maybe international lines?
Okay. First of all, it's not like I want to take the debate to another level. I know the president of Russia has said that, the BRICS is not there to, to challenge or, to replace the current order. But the truth is that when you are dealing with a group of countries that has been responsible for 500 or 600 years of slavery, apartheid, segregation, colonialism, neoliberalism, and then when you know that that system, that group of countries sees the world in terms of universalism, in terms of unipolarism, then when you talk about sovereignty and multipolarity, polycentric world, then of course it is seen as a declaration of war. And I want us, we should not bamboozle ourselves. We should not fool or deceive. We should not deceive ourselves. The BRICS wants to propose a new world order. It is seen as a declaration of war, and the West cannot do any other thing but to try by any means necessary to destroy the BRICS alliance or to weaken or destroy the leading nations of the BRICS countries. This has to be clear in this conversation. Yes, America at this moment cannot do a war against Russia, against China, against India, but the US and NATO countries and then the West, they will do everything possible to try and weaken these nations. This has to be clear in this conversation.
Absolutely.
Now, how do we prevent the West in taking the world into an era of chaos? It is by a strong mobilization. That's why the Kazan meeting was very important, to see all those countries knocking at the doors of the BRICS countries, all those countries that want a new world. It is when we see many countries from the global south willing to work together in partnership and then committed and dedicated to promote a new world order. And then if there are many and they are connected and strong together, that is the only way we can avoid a real drastic or tragic confrontation between the West and the BRICS.
Okay.
Having said that, how African countries play a particular role in this? We saw today the resurgence of Pan-Africanism, the revival of Pan-Africanism on the continent of Africa, be in the streets, be at the African Union, be in everywhere on the continent of Africa, and the symbols of that renewal Pan-Africanism can be seen through Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, even in Senegal, even in South Africa with Malema. So it is in the promotion of that Pan-African consciousness, and then when African countries can come together, again, to quote Kwame Nkrumah, Martin Delany, or Thabo Mbeki, African solutions for African problems. When there was a crisis between Mali and Ivory Coast, Togo played a role. When there was a crisis in Ivory Coast in 2011, Nigeria, contrary to what many people think, it is because Nigeria and Ghana did not want to go and do the war on behalf of France. That's why France activated the United Nations to go and do the war against Gbagbo Laurent. So for me, it is the commitment to the Pan-African consciousness, the imperative to look at the African interest. And then this is how we can reduce the conflict in our midst, and this is how we can reduce the conflicts between African countries and the West that wants to continue exploiting the resources of Africa. So what we need, it is a strong cultural diplomacy. What we need, it is a strong Pan-African international diplomacy. that is the only way we can maybe survive in this world in which might is right. And I don't know if I will have the opportunity to say what I'm going to say because I have the floor. I want to see the opportunity to talk to my friend ACHILLE EKEU. I went to look at the Kazan Declaration and I saw, because we talk about culture, we talk about new world order, we talk about new values. From the point 119 to 122 or 123, we saw that the Kazan Declaration put emphasis on the people-to-people connection, on culture, on education. What I was saying last time, which I'm going to say again today, is that when we see greed, individualism promoted by the Europeans, we need to promote the values of solidarity, and there are some endogenous value systems in those countries which would have been expressed or mentioned in the declaration in order to put emphasis on the values of humanity.
Indeed.
Ubuntu, Satyagraha, Me, Confucianism, and then the Bolsa Familia in Brazil. So I think that between 119 and 122-23, the Kazan Declaration could have mentioned that.
Indeed, humanity.
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
ACHILLE, maybe you want to comment to that?
Okay.
Yes. I think at the end of the show, I told you we agree.
Okay.
We had just a little slight difference on one thing that you said about the BRICS creating a philosophy. That's my point of disagreement that I had with you last time. But overall, we agree. I mean, there's not a major difference. But the idea was that the BRICS is not what I was saying was that the BRICS are not an ideological group. It's more of an economic group of countries coming together to find a way to go around the use of the dollar in transacting in world commerce. That's the main thing. But you mentioned the ideological part of it. You want BRICS to be an ideological group. And that's where I said, no, if you go there, we're going to have a major issue because people don't want to be there to fight each other again like we did in the Cold War, two ideology camps. That's not what the people are getting together for. They're getting together for commerce, for development, to go, to find a way to circumvent the dollar and do business because the U.S. have shown through the fact that they seize the Russian money in their banks, they've shown that they can do whatever it takes for them to punish a country, and so if they can seize the resources or the currency or whatever of Russia, which is a superpower, when we know Russia to be a superpower, what about Cameroon? What about Ivory Coast? What about Singapore? What about, I don't know, Brazil? Those small countries, those countries that don't have nuclear weapons, how are they going to be able to resist if the U.S. sanctions them? So the idea is to find a way to circumvent the U.S. dollar, do trade between those countries in a way that is that's not going to necessitate the use of the dollar because because of the laws of extraterritoriality. The U.S. has a say in every transaction you do with the dollar. So that's the idea. But overall, we agree, okay, Mr. NYEMECK, Dr. NYEMECK. So I agree wholeheartedly with what you said. And the idea is Africa has to do its own. See, it's not because we are part of the BRICS that BRICS have to include everything that is value in terms of value for the continent. No, we also have to impose our values on the world. We have to impose those values that you mentioned. And that has to come from being united, working together, instead of relying on external partners to help us do X, Y, and Z. That's one of the things that I always thought was that
you should be rounding off, please.
The BRICS, yes, the BRICS can give us the protection we need in terms of defense. They can allow us to purchase the weapons that we need to protect us against any invader in the future. And we know the invaders are the same people who colonized us. They are the ones who always want to dominate us. And that's what happened to Libya. Libya had a great plan. but was not in partnership with any of those BRICS countries in the past to protect them. We saw what happened to Syria when when Russia got into that war in Syria. Everything got stopped. You know, everything stopped. So Libya didn't have that. So we need to have that in Africa. We need to have, you know, even a nuclear weapon program, you know, in the whole continent. Why shouldn't we have a nuclear program in Africa? Who said that we shouldn't have it? We should have one of ourselves, so that if somebody attacks us, then we have the same means to respond that they also have. And that will give us the opening, the opportunity to put together our own strategy, our own plans, our own thoughts in motion. Because we can't do anything unless we are comfortable that we can do things in the long term. In the long term, you know, we do things in the short term, 2 years, 3 years, a new leader comes from the West and destroys everything.
Okay, and of course, that's where the complexities do lie, and how can we navigate this on the BRICS bloc? Let's get back to Professor LAEED. You know, we're looking at the Kazan Declaration that pointed the flare in the Middle East and called for, you know, de-escalation or cessation of hostilities. And when we revisit what was highlighted earlier on, I think by Yulia, about power supporting particular countries because of personal interest or national interest, where they can have access to raw materials and others. And we see also that the crisis in the Middle East has largely affected not just Lebanon, the Gaza Strip, but when we move closer to North Africa, it has effect on Egypt and other countries. Professor LAEED, Algeria has become a partner to the BRICS. What do you think is the scope that the maybe countries surrounding the Middle East and other the leadership of BRICS can use to navigate all of these turbulent moments and curtail the maybe geopolitical competition, which is largely negative on the countries in the developing world?
Yes, you are quite right, Clarice. Actually, BRICS is not the adversary of G7, but BRICS as a new group is the adversary of social injustice, of inequality, of war that is happening all over the world, of this imbalance in trade. And as a matter of fact, BRICS is about 45.5% of the world population. BRICS, with its GDP combined, is $28.5 trillion. BRICS is 25% of global trade export. BRICS is, of course, this power of potential countries that want to espouse a new values based on respect of internal affairs of countries, no interference, as I said again and again, social justice, and of course cooperation based on equality. What is happening now, and of course the world has been suffering for Western values hegemony and omnipotence. Take the example of, well, as you just mentioned, Clarice, in Gaza, and of course now in Lebanon, and of course as well as in Iran, and the war between Russia and Ukraine. The West has been supporting blindly, I put it, blindly Israel in its genocidal attacks on people. Nobody is caring now, and and now we have five countries which have the veto power. They are abusing, misusing. This is not fair. This is and now democratic Western democratic countries are teaching us courses in democracy, in human rights, in liberty, and this and that. That what should be come to the end. That does not happen anymore, because what the United States have been supporting blindly Israel with thousands of tons of bombs by killing innocent people. Now we reach the number of 43,000 martyrs in Palestine, elderly, kids, women, in addition 100 injuries. 80% of the infrastructure in Gaza has completely are completely in rubble. Is this justice? Is this democracy? So people are fed up, and of course, we like it or not, the worst, the system, the international system inherited from the Second World War has come to the end. Its validity is over. Now we have to think, we like it or not, we have to cope with the new values, the emergence of new countries, and of course, the war now, or the fight now, or the rhetoric is the West versus the rest of the world, because the West has been supporting again blindly, not only in Middle East, but also is supporting Ukraine, which breached the Minsk Accord, and of course NATO tried to make in danger the security of Russia. It's right, Russia to defend itself, and of course we have to have face to face. I'm not asking for confrontation, but we should have the balance of terror, because these Western countries have not accepted the game of the rules. They are just being maneuvering, weaponizing this and that. That should come to the end. And now, as my friend from GNAKA could say, African countries, Pan-Africanism should be recovered, should be encouraged and strengthened, because that's the only alternative for us. Because we cannot accept this new form of colonialism brandished by Western countries. I can see here right now, of course, we have now, the BRICS is about to become a reality. First of all, with the strong political will of these founders, with about 13 or another 40 countries supporting these values. It's not about question about, it's just question about dignity, about sovereignty, about justice, about fair cooperation. And the West have been always abusing and trying to spoil and to hurt, to harm the whole world, by pretending to be the only reference of democracy. And I give you an example right now. Yesterday or the day before, President Vladimir Putin has symbolically shown the of BRICS. What does it mean? It means the process is underway, and now, right now, as I am talking to you, the new development bank of BRICS has already a capital of $50 billion, which means we are in the right in the right track and the right direction. I am sure confident that now we should Group 7, I would say Group 7 or G7 or Western countries should now think twicely before acting in a disputed way. I'm so sorry to say now. For instance, European Union are meeting and setting boundaries against the migration, but they are badly in need of migrant people for their economy, for their population, because their population is in decline. So I think time has come that we should now move towards this new direction.
Indeed, it is the era of new dimension of sovereignty, of new perspectives, and it's often said that when change comes, the reaction is either positive or negative. I want us to revisit what has been on the table today and bring some sort of clarity on it with you, Yulia. Dr. NYEMECK LAGOKE feels like, okay, the BRICS, of course, it's coming with an alternative, multipolarity. We are moving from the unipolar world. And then you and ARNAUD actually pointed the fact that the BRICS is not coming to replace, the existing system, but also to give an alternative. Let's try to understand, to draw a line between this and see how, the BRICS can mitigate some of the adverse effects that will come as a result of, resistance from this push that is bringing about, a change of mindset where countries are beginning to want to define their stand on international issues of global importance. Hello, Yulia.
Yes, I'm back here. So if you want a vivid illustration to what Brics is currently doing, I think it would make sense to go back to what Joseph Borrell was saying about the jungle and the garden. But here the situation is quite different. So Brics is growing its own garden, and it clearly says, if you want to come to the garden, do please, but you need to respect the rules. Yeah. If you want to come in and take apples from the trees, you need to respect the trade rules that we set here. Yeah. If you want to come, the garden is open, but respecting the rules is key. So I think that principle basically underlies most of the discussions that were taking place and the decisions that were being made, and specifically to implement this principle, all of those basic infrastructure institutions are supposed to be created in the upcoming future, including the investment fund, including many others to come. And the key difference once again, between the Brics and between other kinds of international organizations is that it doesn't have its own bureaucracy. It doesn't have its own administrative machine that, as we all understand the organizational dynamics as one of the priority goals, any system, any organization always sets self-conservation. And that's why we see major disbalances in many different cases, like NATO, for instance. It could have dissolved after the collapse of the Soviet Union because the threat ceased to exist, the threat that was declared to be the key one. Yet, in order to preserve itself, it kept on expanding, it kept on demonizing Russia. That was clearly not the same with what the Soviet Union was. And instead of just, accepting the situation as it was and slowly refocusing to other kinds of threats or changing the key goals, it kept doing what it was doing, and we see the consequences unfolding full scale in Donbass since 2014. So going back to Brics, I think what's important to notice, if we take a look at the situation from another, let's say, more philosophical perspective or a more theoretical perspective. Mm-hmm. So there are certain dynamics in development of any system, including social systems, including countries, including international relations. There are certain dynamics. Okay. But the Brics at the moment just goes to show that the hegemony has been putting too much pressure on the system. So what is required is the platform with a more distributed power, with more power for actors, various actors and decision makers that would be responsible for their own, let's say, country or region. And then at the international arena, they would be interacting based on the principles of mutual respect. So I would say that if you take a look at it using the framework of the spiral dynamics paradigm that is well described in many different books, you will see that it's a very logical sequence or logical consequence of the current state of affairs and current level of development of humanity as a whole.
Okay. Thank you so much, Yulia, for your time and, of course, for your insight into today's edition topic for discussion. Let's stay in Moscow with Arnaud DEVALEY, looking at the changing, times and the changing positions. We want to analyze the fact that countries that are members or even allies to the NATO have understood the reality of the changing world, and we see we want to highlight Turkey here that has shown interest in being a part of the Brics bloc. and also the fact that President Recep Tayyip Erdogan was in Kazan, Russia for this year's summit. We also want to take another example, particularly with the Russia-Ukraine crisis, which was highlighted as well in the Kazan Declaration, how countries aligned to the West have started making statements as to how, you know, this whole thing is affecting them, because when you look at it critically, as they are sidelining Russia and other countries stopping from doing business with Russia, it is benefiting the U.S. But now we see countries coming out outrightly saying there is need for global reforms or reforms of global institutions, the United Nations Security Council, the European Union. How do we then, you know, draw a balance between these changes, and how can we analyze strategically the involvement of Turkey in the Kazan summit, and what effects on the possible resolution of the Russian-Ukraine crisis and other maybe contestations existing between the West and the East?
Okay. I don't know if I have enough time to cover all the aspects of your question. Suffice it to say that Turkey has been very helpful in trying to come up with, provide its own good auspices in resolving the Ukraine crisis on the onset of the active conflict phase of the crisis, which, as Yulia mentioned, goes back, of course, to 2014, but I'm referring to the beginning of the STO, Special Military Operation for the West, when it hosted those talks in Istanbul in March 2022 with the results that we know now, but also acted, trying to act as a mediator in providing humanitarian assistance in the exchange of prisoners, even though some of those individuals were found to have reintegrated the battlefield, and last but not least, in trying to provide a forum for the discussion bearing on the export of grain from the ports of Odessa in the Black Sea to the ports of countries where this grain is most needed, albeit with somewhat, I would say, nuanced results. So Turkey has shown itself to be a trusted partner as far as Moscow is concerned.
Yeah.
And if there's any, I would say, negative aspect to Turkey potentially joining as a full-fledged member, it's at least under the current president. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. You know, he might somewhat revise this philosophy, but Erdogan has somewhat promoted this doctrine of neo-Ottomanism, which would tend to somehow contradict the fundamental criteria of not interfering with the sovereignty of other countries. Yeah. So, in that respect, and in full accordance with what has been talked about Erdogan in the general fashion, the question, I guess, is whether Turkey is a Trojan horse into the BRICS. Let's not forget that Turkey, not only being a member of NATO, is also the second contributor in terms of manpower. And so it has obligation as such. Would that mean, in that sense, that with Turkey joining the BRICS, Turkey should somehow ponder leaving NATO? The question is legitimate. Only time will tell. But for the time being, it would appear as if it's a gamble that BRICS, original BRICS members and the new members, talking about the additional 5, some would say the additional 6, but Saudi Arabia is somewhat on the fence right now. I won't get into the reasons why. It's somewhat explainable, but that's not engaged to the fullest extent as the new members have had since January 1st, 2024. But we'll see. Only time will tell. What's certain is that the West, as you were mentioning, as many of your guests alluded to, will not take it lying down. And there will be pressure put on many of the aspiring BRICS members, full-fledged members, i.e., not only the partners, but the over 109 countries that have expressed thus far the desire to join BRICS at some point in the future. Okay. When you look at the situation bearing on the refusal, the veto by Brazil to allow the entry of Venezuela into BRICS as a partner on the basis of the lack of transparency in the recently held election in July in Caracas, I will remind merely comment on the fact that this position is the position that is espoused by the State Department. Okay. And there's also something that could be said about the fact that Lula did, at the last minute, somehow canceled his venue. Mm-hmm. Brazil is, to be sure, will be chairing the BRICS next year. So I hope this is not, a sign of things to come as far as somewhat an infiltration from the West.
Okay, and in the same perspective, we want to look at the prospect of these changing strategies in ensuring more, positive international relations, which that question we're directing to you, Priestley EKANE, an international relations expert, joining the conversation now with the highlights of the BRICS summit and the Kazan Declaration. Let's see how this is actually fitting into the dictates of international relations and the way forward for the emerging countries.
Thank you for having me, and it's my pleasure to be on the panel with my other co-panelists. With regards to your question, I think we are experiencing a reshaping of international relations from several perspectives, and the BRICS. It's clearly making a statement that the old legend is outfaced, and the new dynamics is here, and not just here, but here to stay. We've experienced with deep frustrations countries not trusting former institutions like trusting institutions like the Bretton Woods institutions with the IMF and the International Monetary Fund, or the United Nations, and there's been the desire for a different offering, for a different language, for different ways to analyze or to engage international relations, and clearly BRICS is here to offer that. And it's made easy because, I like to say, that the old ways are outfaced, and there is no place for arrogance. We are talking about, if we look at just Africa, for example, we're talking about countries that mostly experienced colonization, and the fallouts of colonization and the ensuing independence have not been very profitable to the continent as a whole, and we, especially with programs, with economic programs like the Structural Adjustment Program offered by the International Monetary Fund, it was a fiasco, whereby this international body, through multilateral means or bilateral means, offered huge sums of money to these African countries and defined the terms of this money. And then we have a new offering now with countries like Russia or China, who do not operate in the same ways as most of these Western countries. They do not interfere in the internal affairs or in the sovereignty of these nations, which is something different. And other concepts as the international community, other concepts as globalization, as it was put forward with very utopic content, whereas in reality it wasn't the case. I think people have had a feel of their glasses. Most African countries and countries, some countries in the West, they are now seeing that the other countries from Asia, they're now seeing the desire to create a sort of counterforce, and the counterforce comes with the BRICS, and the summit is like it's been like the other summits where there is kind of a reshaping of global affairs, and with something that started with just Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. We have many countries now hoping to adhere to this organization because, like I said, there is a time to cut away from this paternalism, cut away from this arrogance, cut away from this
manipulation and
Western style of global governance that is not very functional in the 21st century, where concepts as sovereignty, concepts as multilateral diplomacy, concepts as international cooperation must have a clear definition on the international platform, not just words. So I think there is clearly a statement put forth by the BRICS, and the Western countries would profit enough if they would outstretch their hands for cooperation rather than arrogance, because as we know, BRICS is in control of over 40% of global economy. It's over 45% of the global demography. So clearly, it's a strong force to reckon with, and international cooperation with the Western world should be of the essence, not arrogance.
Indeed, talking about redefining it positively. One more time with you, EKANE. What do you think now are those feasible maybe metrics or methods that the BRICS bloc can put in place to be able to assess the progress towards achieving the goals outlined in the important document that leaders signed at the end of the 2024 BRICS Summit in Kazan?
Yeah, I think the purpose here, I think the coming together as a diplomatic bloc, because I like to look at it as a diplomatic bloc, is like I said, is putting forth a new offering and standing as a counterforce to the old ways, the old practices that are now outfaced, and it's up to the West to either keep clenching their hands to international cooperation, or keep engaging the world with the same arrogance. And we know who calls the shots here, because, like I said, the control of the economy. The BRICS is a strong economy. The BRICS is a strong diplomatic bloc. The BRICS is a strong military. The BRICS is a strong international cooperation. So I think if we put it in terms of expression of diplomatic or military force, the BRICS is not what it used to be 20 years ago, and most heads of states, most countries are currently adhering to the ideology or to the desire of a new world, as it is right now, and exerting pressure, like embargoes on Russia or threats on certain countries in the west of Africa. It's not helping. It's further deepening the mistrust many countries on the international scene have had for the West and still have for the West. So I think cooperation, diplomacy is still of the essence if we aspire to build the world we want for the future generation. But if it keeps on thawing, if it keeps on evolving in the cold way as we sometimes see, or in the bellicose manner as we sometimes experience in a different parts of the world, then we are we hope not to get to that undesired escalation, because it would be what we call in international relations MAD, mutual assured destruction.
Okay. Thank you so much, Priestley EKANE. Let's go back to you, Dr. Nyaka LAGOKE. We'll try to be somehow brief because we are almost culminating the show. We're looking at still from the aspect of the African continent. Ethiopia and Egypt are part of the BRICS now. And we know that these countries have a lot of some sort of, we can call it diplomatic roles or maybe food. And then some years ago when Abiy Ahmed took over the leadership there in Ethiopia, he quite made mention of the fact that multilateralism or militarism and conquest has increased across Africa, challenging leaders across the continent to be conversant and more strategic in, trying to handle some of the problems which come as a result of external parties carving new spheres across the African continent. With this already in mind, what makes it difficult for us to, as a continent, or Africa as a continent, to solve these, internal issues which have, are derailing its focus on the issue of multilateralism and having a stronger voice at the international level? Is it feasible to even have a stronger voice at the United Nations Security Council when we have such very, problems tearing the continent apart?
I'm going to be, like you said, I'm going to suggest that I be brief. I'm going to be brief on that. Mm-hmm. We have so many difficulties, some external interference also. People fight over greed and power, personal ambitions, and the positioning of the respective countries. Thinking that the interest of the countries should be prioritized to the detriment of the interests of the continent. But there are possibilities for Africa in order to express its own voice, and then we have already seen that in the past. It is happening again. I know that today there is some tension between Mali and Niger. There is tension between Egypt and Ethiopia, but the responsibility of the countries that are in the BRICS, Ethiopia, Egypt, South Africa, those three, and now we can add Algeria as a partner. They should take the lead in order to be the voices of the African worldview on international affairs. First, we want the reform of the Security Council, and then if an African country has to be there, or if African countries have to be there, they have to have the veto right like the other 5 countries. If it's not possible, we need a complete transformation, and at least on that, I think that all African countries agree, and that's why the 9th Pan-African Congress endorsed by the African Union, led by Togo, which organized already 6 pre-congresses, and which was supposed to take place this year, but which will take place next year. Okay. Its topic is about the reform of international institutions, and that's why the G20 meeting in Brazil, the Kazan Declaration, what the African countries are doing, all of them have to come together, so that we can build a new world based on shared prosperity, a world with less wars.
Indeed, building the new world with Africa standing strong. Let's get to you, Mr. Achille Eke, and on the philosophy of African solutions to African problems. How, and of course, this was reverberated at the BRICS summit in Kazan, Russia. So what prospect for the African continent to be more practical or maybe nationalistic in solving its problems, which this question aligns so much with what Dr. NYEMECK just highlighted, because it is imperative to have a fertile ground that will make us more productive at the international level in terms of taking decisions.
All right, so Africa is very weak on the global stage. We know that, that's a fact. We're very weak. So the only way we can really have a voice in international affairs, including the BRICS. I mean, the BRICS is still, it's not an African organization. It's been created, out of necessity. But still, we are still playing the second roles. I mean, South Africa is there, but we are African. We have to decide what we want in our continent. The African continent is the only continent that doesn't have nuclear weapons. Okay, and everybody is trying to prevent us through all kind of programs, whether it's whether it's green energy. We have to use the green energy program, blah blah blah. All these things is to try to prevent us from going nuclear. But few countries already decided to build nuclear power plants for their countries. Burkina Faso, I think Mali also, maybe Niger also. So, I mean, once we start having those nuclear power plants, then probably the leap to going into a nuclear weapon, it's not quite far. It's not very, very difficult. So, so we need to have a means to defend our continent, so we can be on the same equal footing with other continents. It's the only continent. America has weapons, nuclear weapons, Asia, Europe. It's only Africa. Why do we need that? Because we need to have a means to protect us to be on an equal footing with others. As long as we are perceived as weak, we can't speak at the same level. You've noticed that once you have nuclear weapons, then people start respecting you. People start listening to you. You have a say on the table. It seems like this is how the West look at things from their perspective. Now, the BRICS, don't get me wrong, I think I can make a prediction. The BRICS are somehow going to become a military force one day. They're going to have to build a military force one day. Whether they want it or not, the West are going to push the BRICS folks to that level, to that point, to get to that point. Whether they want, whether it's on purpose or not, because the West looks at BRICS as a threat for them. Dr. NYEMECK mentioned earlier that if you attack the dollar, if you attack the U.S., whether it's economically, financially, or other ways, they're going to retaliate. And the way they retaliate, that the West knows, is to go to war. That's what they know. They're going to try sanctions, but they know sanction doesn't do anything. They already tried, over 1,000 sanctions on Russia. It doesn't give, any result. So for them, it's always going to war. And that's why they have 800 bases around the world. So the BRICS necessarily is going to have to find a way to create a defense mechanism within itself to dissuade the West from attacking those countries, attacking the system they're putting in place, attacking the institution they're putting in place right now that's going to compete against the World Bank, the IMF. Yeah. That's going to happen. And so, let's not be naive. I think we have to find a way in Africa right now. There are so many countries that are yearning to get into BRICS. They are looking for ways to get into BRICS. But BRICS is not a panacea. We have to turn inward and try to figure out how we're going to organize ourselves to have a say that people can respect us. Unless we do that, we are going to be playing the second role, the third roles on the world stage. And that's not something that I want Africa to be. Okay.
Thank you so much, ACHILLE. With you, Professor LAEED, with all that has been said, we're looking at the prospects, or maybe prospect for the future, especially from the perspective of the African continent. What are the long-term prospects for Africa within the BRICS?
Well, I think, talking from my own experience in my lifetime, I have been witnessing and observing the hegemony of Western imperialism and colonialism. And Algeria had suffered from that with the intervention of NATO in the 50s in Algeria. So I feel, of course, proud and happy that my country has recovered its independence and integrity after it paid 1.5 million of martyrs. So the past is costly. That's why I am jealous of the independence of my own country. And that's what I want. I want to spread the justice all over the world. What happened in Kazan 2 days ago, it's an opportunity for all countries that have been under Western colonization, Western dominance, and Western hegemony to mark a shift to a new order based on equity, on respect, on mutual cooperation. This is a chance, of course, to put an end to, as I said, 70 years of war, of terror, of hegemony and dominance by the West, with their fake values of democracy, of human rights, of course, of freedom of the press, and so forth. I think, from my own modest view, today, or these days, the world has been embarked on the new direction, and the BRICS is the driving force to put an end to Western dominance, with all the harms and all the damage they made to the whole world. If we look around us, we see there are I don't speak about only double standards. There are multiple standards when it comes to their interest for the West. But when it comes to countries in whether they are emerging or developing or so forth, they have been belittling them. They have been, of course, as I said, marginalizing them. So I would say, and I do believe strongly, that BRICS is offering an opportunity, and we have to seize this for the future, not only for our continent, of our region, for the whole humanity. Because if you carry on following what is doing with the world, with the Western countries' objective, they are just bringing the world to catastrophe, to another third world. And there are two persons in this, two political figures in this at this time who can bring the world to third war. We have Volodymyr Zelensky in Ukraine and Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel, because those two leaders, they won't accept any rules. There are so many, of course, resolutions by different. Take the example of Israel. There are so many hundreds of resolutions approved by United Nations, by Security Council, by Court of Justice, Criminal Court, by all different bodies. But he does not want to accept that. What does it mean? Is he out of law? Is he above the law? So time has come that we should stop this injustice for the benefit of humanity. So let's give a chance to the humanity to live in peace, in harmony, and with all due respect.
Indeed, all for humanity. Coming back to Priestley EKANE, we're looking at some viewpoints that said because of the, some sort of problems existing between India and China, it will somehow derail this trajectory for BRICS. But then we saw a meeting between Narendra Modi and President Xi Jinping of China. What prospect or future prospect towards solving internal problems and ensuring that there is a solid foundation for BRICS outlined in the Kazan Declaration?
Thank you. BRICS, like other former or other diplomatic groupings, is a concert of nations. It's a concert of nations with which is in which there is bound to be disagreements amongst statesmen or amongst member states. But I think what is important is is what these members stand for, collectively and individually. Yeah. So whatever disagreement that would exist between China and India, for example, I think there is a basis to the bilateral friendship within a multilateral organization as the BRICS, and I don't want us to commit the sin of thinking that BRICS is a panacea to all our problems, and that when the African countries, for example, get into BRICS, it's just an offering. You have to work it. So it's an open door. It's a new opportunity. But if you do not navigate through the still waters of the BRICS, then you might also just drown as with any other organization. So it would be very pretentious to think that African countries or countries of the West or the Middle East or wherever who gain access into the BRICS would suddenly find a peace haven, or would wake up one morning and be militarily strong, or would wake up one morning and be economically untouchable. No, I think these countries are, first of all, sovereign countries, and within their realities, there's a lot of work to do in terms of governance, in terms of building a strong economy, in terms of building a civil society. So if it's not enough to be under the umbrella of the BRICS and feel safe, so Russia, who is a member of the BRICS, is not determining its force by just being a member of the BRICS. It's a continuous work. China is working. Brazil, it's working. So every other country that adheres voluntarily to the BRICS should know that they have a role to play. Especially, I want to focus more on Africa because it's been a huge frustration from the first phase, which was the colonial era to neocolonialism, and then to independence and neocolonialism, and then the search for new partners or for new actors on the international scenes, and then we had the open doors of the BRICS, and it seems it sounds so easy to think that we can. Most of these African countries would sever, for example, their international diplomatic ties with Western countries as France and the US in favor of Russia, in favor of China, and think it's enough. No, because in international relations, interests dominate above every other thing. So if you are not working, if you are not positioning yourself as a subject of international relations, but rather as an object, then in the banquet of decision making, in the banquet of policy making, you still be lacking, and that would be a second failure for most countries of the African continent. So they must engage in a multi-dimensional way. They must project their voice in a shared way. They must culturally express their power, and that's the only way that they could legitimize themselves in such platforms as the BRICS.
Okay, thank you so much, Priestley, EKANE. Lady and gentlemen, of course, I want to extend gratitude to you all for the greater insight. I know we still have a lot to say as far as this topic is concerned, but we are obviously going to come to it subsequently as the days, the months unfold, to see what has been done and what is still lagging behind. Thank you for your greater insight. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, I want to appreciate you for trusting the Pan-African Television for You Media Africa. It was your program, discursive and informative program, Global Insider. And I will leave you in the company of more programs as you continue to watch and understand the changes happening in the global world, and always have in mind it is another view of the world, need for new perspectives. Thank you. Have a lovely weekend and see you soonest.